Hi, I'm PhilXV. So it's officially been 1 year since I supercharged my Crosstrek. I supercharged it last year, July 18th, 2018. She is the first and only root-style supercharged Crosstrek and first and only root-style supercharged FB20 engine. My Rallisport tune has been going great. It's in the stages for power. So we're going to be putting the bigger injectors in it, and we're going to have the Just Send It tune, and then it's going to do some numbers on the dyno and do some numbers at the track, and it's going to be fun. So this video is more in-depth because a lot of people are asking me about how I did the intercooler piping. So a couple of days ago I managed to have the bumper off and I made all that stuff. So here it is. A lot of zip ties. I use this insulation, try and keep heat out. I just installed one of those metal mesh screens to help protect, because my passenger side fog light got hit by a rock and now it's cracked. So I'm just trying to make sure that the intercooler doesn't break. The insulation I'm using here is the same, but I'm using it so that it doesn't rub and shake around. There's actually little bolt holes in the back. You can kind of lock it in. This is I think it's 27-inch wide, 6 or 7 inches tall, 2.5 inches thick. I trimmed a little bit of the inside so I could fit it flush instead of having it slanted. It fits slanted perfectly, but I don't know if that was giving me the best airflow. So, as I explained multiple times, this is kind of like the WRX 2015 front-mounted intercooler setup. You have to do a relocation for your window washer fluid reservoir, or just create a new one like I did. A simple U-bolt holding it up. And it's plugged in because I require them for state inspection. Soldering iron, melted a hole, stuck in the rubber grommets from the original one, silicone sealed them, and waited. They dried, popped into the little motors, filled it up, doesn't leak. And then these are my fog lights, 24 PSX watts, and then I got the glass ones with the H11 swap. You have to do some modification and trimming to the bumper to get some stuff to fit. I just decided to try my hand at one of those mesh screens while I was at it. It's not perfect. I did the flattening it out, but you know, it's not a show car, it's a performance car. And then there's enough space. This is 2.5 inch diameter piping. And it comes up. Double blow-off valve setup. Hooked up the brake booster line. MAF sensor, so I don't run rich or lean because you have to have the blow-off valves if they're not recirculating before the MAF. If they're recirculating, you can put them after the MAF, but they have to be before the MAF if you're just going to have that whoosh sound like everybody likes. Well, technically they're my wastegates. Like I said, I'm a professional chef, not a mechanic, so I just found a bunch of cheap parts, put them together, and it somehow works. This is a solid. Can't move it at all. Well, I'm actually shaking the camera more than I'm shaking this thing. Originally, I had it bolted from here to here. That was bad. It was shaking the whole car. So now I made this one, my old catch cam with my check valve. Bracket coming up, bracket going out. Hooked up the ECU because if you had the Eaton M45 or even like the M62, it'll fit. But you got this huge space right here that only the M65 has. And it actually does come with a bypass on it, which I plated off. And then I use the other part as the intake coming down. Just a simple steel plate. It's bolted up into it, JB welded, just so you know it stays. And then some exhaust piping because I welded it to the steel. My Harbor Freight welding, and put some JB weld around it to make sure it was perfectly sealed because I'm not the best welder. I'm still learning. Like I said before, this is just my amp. It's not hooked up because the car's been running the track. A lot of people, you could just let your breather out, or I think I heard somebody say you could hook up your breather line to before the boost, like before the turbo, or like in the vacuum area before the supercharger. You could hook up your breather there. But I see most people just plumbing it. And I decided to make a little catch can of my own. It does catch oil. Very little though. I've actually had more blowback before I was boosted. Now it seems to have very, very little blowback. It might just be all passing through. But when I pull off this stuff, well, it's not like wet at all or oiled, so it's doing its job, sucking up the oil out of the PCV system. A lot of people get confused and they think that the breather is part of the PCV system. It's just a breather. This is the PVC system. This is like the vacuum. I haven't really had problems stopping, but I might be tempted to get one of those Perrin master brake cylinder mount things. Like I said, it's just simple angle iron. It took 6 hours to pull this out of the Mercedes, and that was pretty much destroying the Mercedes in the process with an angle iron, angle grinder, a sledgehammer, a sawzall, and everything just to get to the supercharger. The car wasn't like front end damage. It looked like it just died or something like that at the junkyard. But we had to pretty much cut this entire frame off and everything like that because the supercharger's mounted at the bottom right part of the engine. And when we finally got it out, it was like, oh my God, thank you, God. And then I had this mounted to the engine block in less than an hour. I had this built, welded, and I even had it running on the OEM belt. I took this pulley out and I moved it up here so the belt was kind of pushed down a bit. And I had it on the OEM belt, but that left almost no belt on the crank because it just went over the side and then down towards the water pump, and then back up, and then it still did its loop around here. So when I did go off-roading at Roush Creek and I went through the water, I did have problems with the belt kind of slipping. It didn't fall off or fly off, it was wet, and it was just slipping off the crank, nothing else. It was pretty tight, but it was still slipping off the crank. Just let the car idle, it evaporated itself, and then we continued to drive the rest of Roush Creek. Conquered the green trail, the easy trail. If you're thinking about doing manifold spacers and you're going to copy my build, there's no room. Manifold spacers would be best if you were doing a turbo setup and you had the turbo mounted back here and you're running the intake right between or right under the intake manifold. Doesn't look bad.